Welcome to the global phenomenon, Surviving the Survivor, where we're all just trying to survive in a rough world.
So, Carm, we live in an absolutely horrible world, and I'm kind of upset that I've had 3 children. Are
you crazy? First of all, it's a beautiful world.
No, it's a horrible world.
It's a beautiful world. Listen to the Louis Armstrong song.
We just did an interview.
It's a wonderful world.
As you guys know, we record the podcast out of chronological order, and we had a guest on today who we'll tell you about in a minute, but life is not fair. Life is a horrible place.
Why are you wearing glasses, by the way?
Wearing my Surviving the Survivor shirt.
Well, take off your eyeglasses.
100% not. My vision's going. These are clear lenses, but I need them for my vision. It's psychological.
No, you look really not yourself.
What do I look like? What do I look like?
I think you are impersonating somebody like Larry King or something.
By the way, I put this shirt and hat on Instagram. I cannot tell you how many people said, I want one. See?
Yeah, they want one for free.
The brand is spreading. This is going to be for sale on survivingthesurvivor.com, which will be updated once because I will never understand how to update it after our marketing guys.
All right, enough digressions. Let's get to the meat and potatoes.
Man, life is a terrible thing.
Okay.
And it just seems to get worse every day. They just bombed a children's hospital in Ukraine, as you say. That was today's news. Oh, by the way, and then our friend JL Cauvin, shout out to you, who we had on as a guest as a hilarious comedian, just tweeted out that they're expecting spiders to fall from the sky this spring across the East Coast. This is the headline. An invasive species of spider the size of a child's hand is expected to colonize the entire East Coast this spring by parachuting down from the sky, researchers announced. This is from Axios, a legitimate news organization, to which JL Cauvin, who we had on, who's a hilarious guy.
And it wasn't funny what he said.
He tweeted, "What the F?" all in caps. I thought it was funny.
What is funny?
I don't know. Anyway.
I didn't think. I don't know. We think different things are funny.
By the way, how is Yom Kippur going for you?
Yeah,
I have not eaten today. It's 2:30 in the afternoon because I had to take you to the Volvo dealership to buy you your first new car in 12 years.
No, it's not new.
It's a CPO, certified pre-owned.
It's called an old car.
I already told you, both my daughters and my son will use that to learn how to drive.
He said to me on the way home from the dealership, I sold my old one, which was literally melting down. You admit it?
It was literally melting.
Literally, physically, the upholstery, the vinyl melted.
The vinyl. Not the vinyl, but the vinyl. That's a new type of
anyway,
material.
On the
it's
way,
made of
on
wine
the way,
and vinyl, and it's called vinyl. It's made from a fermented wine.
Anyway, on the way here, he said to me, try not to bang up this car. Because after you'd use it, meaning after I'm dead or I'm disabled and can't drive it, he says, my daughter will drive it. She will be 16.
Carm, I was like, my jaw was dropping. You were asking about warranties for 2031. I'm like, you are an optimist.
No, I said, how long does this guarantee last? And he said, blah, blah, blah. And I said, can you buy additional? He says, yes, until 2031. I said, terrific.
Beautiful. I'll take it. Okay.
No, I didn't take it. Because I'm a realist.
From cars, we switched to planes, and actually a really sad anniversary, even though we don't like to use that term because it implies happiness. But tomorrow, March 10th, which you'll be listening to this after March 10th, but pretend it's March 9th in your mind. Visualize it. It's March 9th. Tomorrow is the 3-year anniversary of a Boeing 737 MAX 8 plane crashing into...
I must say...
Carm, this is not a funny... We're talking about 2 planes.
No, but Joe...
Oh boy. This is where it goes off the rails.
Joel, you don't wear glasses.
Sorry.
I know this is really, I have a very, very insane way of reacting to horrible things. I usually have a laughing fit, but looking at Joel with these fake eyeglasses, I suddenly.
Carm, it's my new look. I love these glasses.
You know what?
They've got clip-on lenses.
People have to be insane to want to wear glasses if they don't wear
I need
them.
glasses. They just don't have lenses that work for glasses. They're clear.
I'm sorry, because I'm not as retarded at this point or as senile.
By the way, that's super offensive to say that. That's like politically incorrect to say retarded. Because
okay, mentally challenged.
Yeah, people have retarded children and they get very offended at that. Had a way to destroy our demographic.
Oh my God.
Our audience.
Oh my God. I'll get them hate mail. That was a throwback to the old language. But I'm not mentally so challenged as to laugh at a tragedy like this. And I have a very crazy way of reacting. Sometimes I have like to let out energy when I laugh. But
tomorrow,
looking at you look like a joke.
Tomorrow, 3 years ago, a plane fell from the sky and landed in a field in Ethiopia. 55-year-old Joeseph, I have to find his name to say it properly. Joeseph Waithaka was killed. He was 55 years old. His daughter was just featured in a Netflix documentary about Boeing. Her name is Zipporah Kuria, a beautiful, smart, intelligent, sweet young woman, and she's on next on the Main Schmooze to talk about not only the crash, but about the horrendous people at Boeing and how they tried to cover it up in corporate greed and all the horrible things that I talked about in this world off the top. Be right back.
Do you want to help my son? His company, Content Partners Media, specializes in brand video and content creation for innovative companies and others. Please go to www.contentpartnersmedia.com and hire him. I repeat, please go to www.contentpartnersmedia.com.
Welcome back to Surviving the Survivor. It's time now for the Main Schmooze.
Carm, don't worry about my phone buzzing during an interview. Worry about yours. That's all I have to say. You told me to shut my phone off.
Mine is off.
So today is actually a very somber day, and I'll tell you why. Do you know why?
I think I have an inkling, yes.
Because it's a day before 3 years since a tragic plane crash. And, you know, it's been a while, and I think people take it for granted. You and I have not really talked about flying anxiety in a while. Are you anxious? You haven't really flown lately.
I always hated flying. I always...
Why? You're not in control, right?
That's one reason. But I think I was still born when everything happened on the earth, more or less. Flying wasn't like today. But anyway, I don't like flying. I'm scared. Every time my children fly, I am nervous.
Get nervous, and I'm the same way. But today we have a super interesting guest who I actually reached out to after watching a very popular Netflix documentary right now. The guest is Zipporah Kuria. How are you, Zipporah?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Doing great, thanks. I love the accent. It makes us sound more or less intelligent than we already are, if that makes sense.
We should. I prefer the American accents, the British, quite dull.
Really? Not I. All right, so let me tell the audience a little bit about Zipporah. Zipporah, which by the way is a beautiful biblical name, Zipporah Kuria is featured in the critically acclaimed new Netflix documentary called Downfall, The Case Against Boeing. It's an investigation into the 2 Boeing 737 MAX crashes in Ethiopia and Indonesia that killed 346 people. The movie explores both the root causes and the human cost of which Zipporah's dad was sadly a victim. Joeseph Waithaka, her father, was killed in the Ethiopian Airlines crash on March 10th, 2019. That is 3 years to the day tomorrow. Joeseph was one of 157 people who died in the disaster, including 8 crew members. Zipporah, since his passing, has become a humanitarian, a public speaker, and a social entrepreneur. She uses her voice to advocate for others in aviation safety, well-being, social justice, and racial equality. And she's been a prominent voice within her community, within the EU. She lives in the UK, as well as here in the United States, using her voice in both the Senate and Congress. So, Zipporah, thanks for joining us. Never like to call these an anniversary because an anniversary implies a happy occasion, but tomorrow is 3 years since your father's passing in that horrible plane crash. How difficult is it each year when this date comes upon us?
It kind of looms over you like a few days before. You kind of just feel it in your body and in your mind. And I think the last 2 years specifically have been very difficult because it's still been reoccurring, if that makes sense. The media hasn't forgotten, and information was still being unearthed. I don't think this day will ever fully have me present, if that makes sense. It always just feels like an out-of-body experience. It takes you right back to that Sunday morning on the 10th of March. And I think there's also like an additional layer where it's heartbreaking because it's like, wow, it's been 3 years since I've seen my dad, since I've spoken to my dad, since I've, hugged him, had a cup of tea with him. And I think the more time passes, the harder it gets because you just realize how much time is elapsing. And I think it just becomes more congruent and more real that this person isn't coming back. And I think that every anniversary, there's always something that's happening that just brings you back to this moment. I think last year was the preparation of the ungrounding of the 737 MAX process had just begun a few days before the 10th. The year before that, it was the discovery that they knew that the accidents were I can't even call them accidents. The crashes were preventable. So I think every year brings with it new challenges. But it's also bittersweet because you see the resilience of the other families, and it's like 3 years and we're still here, we're still trying our best.
I'm glad to hear that. Just so the audience knows again, Zipporah's dad, his name is Joeseph. He's 55 years old when the crash happened. He was traveling aboard an Ethiopian Airlines flight. It was number 302. It came down just 6 minutes after takeoff from the Bole International Airport near Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. The first Boeing 737 MAX that went down was, I think, just 6 months before that, in October of 2018. That plane actually crashed into the ocean off the coast of Indonesia, and that killed 189 people on board. Zipporah, I know you cherish his last words. What were his last words? What was your last conversation like?
It was just a regular, when someone's getting on a flight and they're heading somewhere, he said, "I love you." But it was kind of weird because he said, "I love you" about 3 times. And I was a bit like, okay, Dad, I love you too. I heard you the first time. And then he said, "Nito kwanana inkikuyu," which is, our mother tongue, which means I'll see you later. But it has no definitive. It's not like I'll see you tomorrow, I'll see you next week. It's just I'll see you when I see you. And I'm glad that those are the last words that I had the privilege to hear from my dad, which was "I love you," and hopefully I'll see you later.
And you have brothers and sisters, right?
Brothers. She has brothers.
Brothers.
Yeah.
Apologies. Okay. And how are they coping with the loss?
I think the best that you can. I think the loss of a parent is unlike any other loss because it just feels like you've lost the 2 pillars. Your parents are the 2 pillars that your whole life, your idea of what life is, are built on. And I think that losing my dad feels like we've lost that that pillar, and life becomes somewhat fractured. So we're just trying to figure out how to navigate around it. And I think they're trying the best that they can as new dads. You know, these are moments that I think they would be needing their father to show them how to navigate parenthood. You know, they're married, they're trying to figure out how to do life. And I think it's that kind of you make do with what you have, and you hope that the wisdom that he gave us when he was alive is enough to last us this lifetime. And he had it in abundance. So I think we are doing our best, all of us.
You are the only daughter, and usually there is a bond between, you know, the daughter and the father.
Yeah.
Even that is even stronger. So it's double.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult.
Tell us about your dad. What did he do? What kind of guy was he? What kind of dad was he?
Oh, my dad was like the most amazing person ever. And I know anyone would say that about their parent, but my dad really was hands down the best. He worked as a probation officer. So he just kind of was retiring out of that. He was going back to Kenya to do some work in the village that he grew up in. He just installed like a water pump, and trying to see how he could, you know, aggregate the land and really help the community come along and use what he's learned in the West to kind of build where he grew up. My dad loved his tea. I'm sure, as you saw on the documentary, every 2 minutes my dad was asking me for a cup of tea. But the man had banter, you know. If anyone could give banter as good as they could take it, it was my dad. And I think a lot of parents are parents to their children, but they're rarely ever friends. But my dad really was like our best friend. Movies, like anything, you know. He even made us like things that kids don't usually like playing chess, playing Scrabble. Yeah, he was just an absolute legend. And he just knew how to human. Like, it didn't matter whether like you were the president of the United States, or whether you were, you know, someone who felt like that they weren't valued in this life. My dad just had a way of making everybody feel seen and heard and loved, and cared for. And yeah, he was just an absolute awesome man. You know, a lot of people may have watched that documentary and thought, why is she smiling so much? You know, her dad's died. But every time I think about that man, my heart it gets happy, because human beings like that rarely exist anymore. But we were gifted with the opportunity of growing up with him and being a part of his legacy.
Wow, it's beautiful. I'm thinking right now, her dad was teaching her chess and Scrabble, and I'm watching UFC fights with my daughters. It's probably not the best example.
No,
I took him to a rodeo last weekend. I'm like the white trash dad. I gotta.
You know, he did some of those things too. I'm just trying to preserve his legacy. You know, you have to.
I've got to pick up my game. But Zipporah, I know it's touching. You actually physically carry a memento of your dad with you everywhere. What is that you carry with you?
It is a piece of shrapnel from the plane, and I think it's just for the last few years, it's just been to remind me that this is real. You know, I think that loss within itself kind of leaves you feeling like you're caught between a nightmare and some form of reality that you're not quite sure is real. But I think the way it happened was so surreal. You know, like, planes don't fall out of skies. You know, that doesn't happen. And even if it does, it doesn't happen to people like us. You know, it doesn't happen to me. You know, it happens to other people. And I think for a while I struggled to fully grasp that it was real. So it was just touching that to just remind myself this has happened. But also it had another meaning to it, which was just a reminder not to give up fighting for justice, and not to give up fighting, because, you know, it is the remnants of bad decisions, greed, and all of the things that you want to say about Boeing. It kind of sums it up. And I think on the days that it got hard to fight or to want to be here anymore, because those moments really were rampant, because you're grieving with the whole world watching. It was just a reminder to keep going, to keep fighting, and to keep making sure that no other 26-year-old daughter has a piece of shrapnel, 23 then piece of shrapnel to
I
look
have
at.
a question. I confess I was shook up when I heard that, it was a technical problem with Boeing. But then I did, if I understand it correctly, in the beginning, Boeing denied that it was a. How did it?
We're gonna get into. I want to get into all that, but real quick before we hop into that, and I will lead us through. Zipporah, just take us back to to that time. So the plane went down on a Sunday morning. You get a phone call. Who was the call from? And then how long before you actually went to the crash site?
So I got a call from my brother Sunday morning, which was very bizarre because I tend to go to church in the afternoon. I was like, why is he waking me up on a Sunday? This is the only day I get to lie in. And he's like, brace yourself. There's been a plane that's, crashed in Ethiopia. And I think it's the plane that Dad was on. I was like, it's impossible. Dad doesn't fly Ethiopian Airlines. Could have never been him. To Googling it. And I think at that point, we didn't know there had been any fatalities. We weren't aware. And then the Prime Minister of Ethiopia tweeted condolences to all the loved ones. Next thing I know, there's a flight manifest that's been leaked on Twitter. It says Joseph Kuria Waithaka, and it's like, this is unreal. I think Ethiopian Airlines were only letting 2 family members go to the crash site at the time, and we just felt like it was appropriate for my mum to definitely be one of those people, and my older brother to be there to support her. It must have taken 2 weeks before we could go to the crash site as additional family members. And it was surreal because I think even in between that, we had a funeral with no coffin, like nothing. It was just a very, very strange time. But
and I don't want to get morbid, but the first plane crashed into the ocean. This plane crashed into a field, and there was literally nothing left, basically, right? It was just a crater, correct?
Yeah, it was just a crater and lots of shrapnel. It was a lot.
When the plane in Indonesia went down, had you heard about that? Did you know about it? Did you really kind of think twice about it, or not really at that point?
I had briefly. Ironically enough, it was my dad. It was on the news, and I think Boeing, the pilots were being blamed for the Indonesian crash. And I just remember my dad saying, here we go with corporate. You blame the third world country pilots, and you get away with a cover up. He just said there's probably more corruption behind this than we realize. Planes just don't kind of fall out of skies. And he kind of said that in, I think it must have been January. And then here we are in February. He's preparing to fly out March. We're now in the same position. And I think even to answer your mom's question, it's not really like a technical fault. It's a design fault that they actively concealed and hid from, the Federal Aviation Authority and from all the pilots that were flying that plane. Until this day, I don't really think it's safe. But, it was something that I think he picked up on. And the irony of it is that he ended up being a victim of it, because nobody really cared. I think when we speak to the Lion Air families, they talk about the work they tried to highlight the problems, especially with the pilot's mum. They just knew something was wrong, but nobody was listening. They were screaming at the top of their lungs, saying there's something wrong here, and no one wanted to pay attention. So it was a thought, but it was nothing more than just a thought.
Zipporah, don't take Karmela's silence as a shun. Is she just, I can tell that this is upsetting her. She's angry at me for having just topics like this.
No, it's not true. It's not true.
But here's the thing. So we're going to get to the meat and potatoes now, which is corporate greed, which is really the story, and Boeing. Now, people do things with blind faith. One of those things is getting on an airplane. I mean, how many millions of Americans and Brits and everyone else in the world get on an airplane every day? And you say, oh, this company is on the up and up. They're looking out for our safety. Here in the great United States of America, just this past week, my wife is also a reporter. Her story a couple of days ago was a JetBlue pilot flying from Buffalo to Fort Lauderdale. He decided to have 10 tallboys, which are giant beers, and was 4 times over the legal limit. They had to pull him out of the cockpit. So sometimes you go onto these planes and you have blind faith, and you probably really shouldn't. So with respect to Boeing, the way I understand it, and you can explain it better, they wanted to create a new plane, but instead of re-engineering the entire plane, they kind of, for cost-cutting measures, took an older model and souped it up and created bigger engines, and then created software to compensate for those bigger engines, which were further up on the plane. And that's called the MCAS system, which I will tell you what it stands for: Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. And basically that was intended, I believe, and you'll explain this in a second, Zipporah, was to basically balance out those larger engines. But the software, for all intents and purposes, malfunctioned and was making the planes nosedive. And it was basically a cost-cutting measure. Is that correct?
It is. And just to add on to that, it's that they have these things that are called angles of attack, which are what feed information into the MCAS system to tell it to force the plane to nosedive. And the backstory is Boeing and Airbus have been competing for years. Airbus had made this fuel efficient, also almost automated aircraft, single aisle, I think, and it was able to do long haul and short haul flights, and it was selling like crazy, and Boeing felt the pressure. So instead of continuing designing the plane that they were already taking time to design, they just fast tracked it so they could be at loggerhead to their competitor. And the only thing is with the Airbus Neo, they have 3 points of reference, 3 angles of attack. So when the sensor gives information, they cross-reference with each other. So it only acts on 2 points of reference. But with the Boeing ones, it just took it could have been something as silly as a bird hit one of the sensors of the plane, and the other sensor, the correct data and information was nullified by the other sensor that was faulty, and it forced the plane to nosedive. So it's that kind of, the plane is already, the design is flawed, and a lot of it is frustrating because the plane still isn't safe, because as you described it, they put bigger engines on because they've not fixed that aerodynamic error. The issues are still very present. But to this day, because I know you had a lot of concerns. The planes were grounded for 20 months. And then eventually they didn't want to ground them initially. Then they grounded the planes for 20 months. God knows what they were doing behind the scenes. And it's kind of like the mask mandate. One day you're wearing masks, the next day masks come off, everything's okay. Yeah, you think that the government is watching out for you, but who knows? But you said, I'm still not getting on this plane, and you basically shouted from the mountaintop saying, these planes are still not safe. Is it still your contention that the 737 MAX 8s are not safe to fly? They're not safe because there are questions we have asked Boeing to answer, and they're still yet to answer till this day. Can this plane fly without the MCAS system? Is it safe to fly without the software? If the answer is no, the plane is not safe to fly at all. And from what we know, and you've summed it up very well, the engines are too big on the plane, which causes the plane to tilt as it flies sometimes because of the imbalance. So the software is there to compensate for a design flaw. So if you haven't fixed the design flaw, then a software update is not going to fix it. If I've got a cracked screen on an iPhone and I update the iPhone, it's not going to make visibility any better. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So my thoughts are the plane isn't safe. And they've hidden behind kind of like patent law and things like that in terms of having to answer those questions to family members and loved ones. But these planes are still not safe. I would walk to America before I got onto a 737 MAX.
I think I read that you were in the States and you were one of your connecting flights was a MAX, and you said, you took another plane. Is that right? I think I read that.
So I was supposed to be flying out to the Utah, the Sundance Film Festival for the documentary. And I checked and I didn't, so 737, I was like, I don't want to know. Let me look for a longer flight that would add another kind of 6-7 hours onto my flight time, but that's fine because at least I know that I'm doing the best that I can to be safe. I would rather do that than get on a 737 MAX.
It's a parenthesis, but I remember vaguely there was a moment, I don't know if it was related to these planes, this design, but I know that there was a time when they had to switch off the what people were listening to if they were watching a movie or watching music. Everything had to be switched off because it influenced the computer system. So I remember being on a long distance flight, and when we were taking off, they switched off everything because prior to that part of the plane would cause a danger of crashing.
It's a good thing people don't use electronics in 2022.
Well, that's exactly it. And they very politely ask, please don't use your computers and your phones and so forth.
Yeah,
because it interferes with the general, And
then 19 Instagram addicts on the plane are like having withdrawal and then checking. Yeah.
And you one of them.
I'm one of them. Always have to throw me under the
But
bus,
I remember, I thought how flimsy it is if we are now relying on the public, not using...
I just think not long. So I was a national correspondent.
I am totally paranoid when it comes to flying.
So
already before this conversation.
I flew for a living, basically, because I was a correspondent nationally for Fox News. And I remember not long ago, Phil, my photographer, and I, the flight was delayed. We get there and the cone of the plane is off. And we're like, literally, just the front end of the plane is off. And we're like, what's the matter? They're like, oh, we've got a little issue with the radar in the cone. And you know what you do? You just go, okay. I'm sure the guy in the fluorescent vest is handling everything really well. And, an hour late, you get on and
you just give your life away. I always felt that.
So listen, so after the first plane crash, and this is where the story gets intriguing and interesting. After the Indonesia crash, and the wife of the pilot was very vocal, I think the mother of the pilot, Dennis Muilenburg, do you know who he is, Carm?
No.
He's the former CEO when this all happened. The former CEO. You got a buyout of over $60 million. So that's what you get when you...
his salary.
When you literally run a company literally into the ground, you get a $60 million bonus. That's what Mr. Muilenburg. I wonder if he sleeps well at night, Mr. Muilenburg. But so after that crash, Karmela, the first crash, he came out and said it was the safest plane Boeing had ever built.
That doesn't mean anything. The others were worse.
Yeah, but how infuriating is that? We laugh about it, but sadly, your father's not here. How infuriating is it to know that this kind of corporate greed and the need to compete against, Airbus?
Airbus.
The need to, that superseded the safety of your father. How infuriating is that?
Well,
it is. I have never been so outraged in my life. I don't think I had ever encountered the raw feeling of rage until this moment. It is so infuriating. And it's not just infuriating, it's also petrifying, the length that people will go to make money. You mentioned that Muilenburg got $60 million as a payout for what had happened, because we can't say that kind of stuff, but we know what's really happening behind closed doors. But yeah, he retired with $60 million. He's the same age as my dad, and my dad paid for that with his life. Have you ever heard from him? Did you ever hear from him? No, we've never heard from Boeing. we only hear from them when they do press conferences. That's the only time that we ever hear from them.
No one from Boeing ever reached out to say, we're sorry about your father. We're sorry what happened.
They never wrote a letter with the name of the victims. That never happened. They never reached out to the families. Even their recent admission of guilt has been done through a press conference. Nobody's ever written to the families, any of the families.
You suck, Boeing.
Wait a second. I have a question here. 1 second. I wrote it
Karmela,
down.
if you have a question, you got to have it ready. You can't say you have a question. This isn't you.
Anyway, listen to this. Be quiet.
Zipporah, we were at a car dealership before this, which is another reason Karmela and I look the way we do. I had to help her get
We are
a car.
a little bit like somebody peed on us or something. I wrote this down, that compensation in return for this not asking anymore for more. Is that correct? That they were offering compensation so that you would not ask for more?
I'm not too sure. I don't think that's the case. I think a lot of families have engaged in lawsuits, and it's still in the process. The only kind of...
Did you receive any compensation?
There's not been any compensation.
And are you in litigation? Are you in litigation with Boeing?
I think a majority of the families are.
Okay.
And
I hope you bankrupt them. Honestly, I hope you do. I really do.
They're
Screw
too rich.
Boeing.
You can't bankrupt them. They're so rich you can't bankrupt them.
They got little friends.
She's got a really good point.
If you have questions,
but do you understand what? Now you said that they admitted guilt. Isn't there a consequence for admitting guilt? Don't you have to do something if you admit guilt?
I mean, if you admit guilt, they had to pay a fine of 2.5 billion, which really kind of just goes to a lot of the companies that have lost profit because of the inconveniencing of the grounding of the plane and so forth and so forth. It's not compensation for death. It's just a fine that they had to pay as a result of their wrongdoing. And to be honest with you, it was not really an admission of guilt. It was more like an exchange of freedoms for money, because in having to pay that fine, they signed a deal that would then give them immunity from criminal pursuit. So it's one of those things where they were ordered pay the families, all 356 families, 500 million accumulated into one, make them split that, which is not really a lot of money, but it's not compensation. It was just as a result, if that makes sense. But it's one of those things where I think some families declined that. They didn't want to be a part of that. Because we want to fight for real justice, and to make sure that this isn't happening to other people.
So what's holding up the fight now? Is it in the courts? Is it already in the courts and it's proceeding, or what is happening right now?
The litigation is still ongoing. There's been a lot of delays though due to COVID and all of that kind of stuff. And of course, you would expect companies like Boeing to throw as much as they can to the lawyers that are, fighting for the victims, to make sure that they're constantly burying them in discovery and so forth and so forth. Just your general lawsuit stuff to see how long you can carry it on before people get tired. But
they're dragging it through the system on purpose. Shame on you, Boeing. I dare your CEO to come on this podcast. I will shred you to pieces. Come on this podcast. I'm going to write a letter to Boeing CEO. Now, here's another thing that's kind of insane. Boeing issued an internal report during all this, and it revealed that if a pilot reacted in less than 10 seconds to the activation of an automatic system known as the MCAS, the failure would be catastrophic. You imagine if you were a pilot, Carmen, you had 10 seconds to save the plane?
I have very slowly reflexes. It would be guaranteed crash. Guaranteed crash.
I mean, that was an internal report. So they knew about it, and this is the other part of it. They didn't tell the pilots. Boeing allegedly did not tell the pilots about the MCAS system, let alone train them in how to deal with such an emergency. So they were literally flying blind. Like they did not know how to fix the problem once it was happening. And then through these 20 months, when the planes were grounded, Boeing, quote unquote, claims that it worked closely with the airlines, providing them with detailed recommendation, blah, blah, blah. Then the new CEO comes in, a gentleman named David Calhoun. You're the guy I want on my podcast. Let's see if you have the courage to come on. I'm going to send this guy an email today.
He will.
I will.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell him I spoke to a
family of the week.
Correct. And I'm going to say, let's see if you have the courage to do this, to face all 300 of my viewers globally.
Well, don't be funny.
By the way, Zipporah, not to digress, have you ever heard of MrBeast?
MrBeast, no.
I'm happy to hear that because you're young. He's on YouTube. I totally digress. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast. He has 98 million followers on YouTube. He's 23 years old, made just off his side business of selling hamburgers, he made $150 million in 15 months. So,
but what has that got to do with?
Nothing to do with anything. Zipporah's young. I wanted to know if she had heard of MrBeast.
At least now I know. I've learned about him.
She will Google him now.
Back to David Calhoun. So he's the current CEO of Boeing. He says in a statement, I'm not sure if this was in a written statement or on camera, and I quote now, "We will never forget the lives lost in the two tragic accidents that led to the decision to suspend operations." What a heartfelt statement. Did that mean anything to you at all when he spoke?
It has meant absolutely nothing any time of them have spoken. I think what spoke louder to us as families was the $8 million bonus that he was getting to get the 737 MAX back in the air, and the fact that he took that on, and also the lack of accountability that he's been held to, considering the fact that he had more to do with these crashes. He was more hands-on with the process of the design of these planes than Muilenburg ever was. And, for me...
Why so? Was he on like the engineering side of things when these planes were being built, or?
I think he was part of the decision-making board. I think when you listen to people like Ed Pierce, who came forward to, whistleblow and so forth, he's part of that kind of chain. And, the lower that they go, the more responsible they become for the direct decision. In my imagination, Muilenburg was somewhere playing golf, too concerned. I think when the first crash happened, then he's called in to kind of fix problems. He fails to fix them. And Calhoun gets promoted, but I don't quite know how their corporate system structure works.
Who's this guy Pierce that you just mentioned, the whistleblower? I'd not have heard of him.
Ed Pierce, if you Google him, he tried to alert people. There was a congressional hearing that I went to.
I do remember this. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a witness. In that hearing where he had gone to Boeing, to the board members and, to the highest level of management that he could, and said, these planes are unsafe. The workers and engineers are overworked. There's debris and there's all of these things that are happening that shouldn't be happening. We should be producing less planes. And he said, we're worried about life here. If this was the army, because I think he used to be an engineer in the army, and he said, if this was something that was happening when I was in the army, it would have been brought to a stop already. There'd have been corrections made. And he was told that, it's a good thing that Boeing, it's a good thing that the army isn't a profit-making machine, kind of, paraphrasing that. But, for us at Boeing, bottom lines matter. So, and nothing was done. He was just kind of dismissed.
And was there any retaliation against this guy, Ed Pierce, for coming forward?
I'd be lying if I told you if I knew that. I'm not too sure.
I am very much a person who kind of goes to the bottom line of issues. And I still don't understand, where does the situation stand today, 3 years after? Where does it stand? Was there any progress for the families?
Are you talking about a safety?
No, I'm talking about compensation right now for the families. I care about that too. At least to let them bleed that way.
Is there anything definitive? You said it was going through the court system still, right?
Oh, we're still in the middle of litigation.
And you are like from 35 different countries, correct?
Yeah, 35 different countries in total.
And how do you, who coordinates, who organizes the families? How does it work so that everybody would be on the same page?
So all the different families have different lawyers, different attorneys that do the legal part side of stuff. But when it comes to kind of organizing and us coming together, we have a WhatsApp group that we've been a part of since the crash, and we communicate on there. We send each other messages when the anniversaries are coming along, when there is aviation advocacy work that's going on, when there is something happening in litigation. If like one lawyer says something, we tend to kind of just share our information and see how we can work.
But it doesn't make to me, as a total outsider who is not even a legal person, doesn't make any sense to me that each has their own lawyer rather than a class action suit all of them together.
I think because of the nature of what happened and the fact that people are from different countries and so forth, and the different cases attribute for different things, they've been consolidated into one court case. So there is one lead lawyer who gives information, but all of them represent different families. But that's just to make sure that all the families are catered to.
Okay, so there is one head honcho, so to speak, who runs, and that the other lawyers are just defending the right of each family in this process.
Yes, so all of them. But if it comes to, say, for example, if every family has a trial, they'll have their own lawyers. But when it comes to the consolidation of information, the judge wanted everything to come into one case, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. This guy, Ed Pierce, is sort of a hero, an unsung hero, because I do remember him from the documentary now. He was a Boeing engineer who basically blew the whistle, which reminds me of a story when I was an investigative reporter at Fox in New York City, locally. Do you remember this, Carm?
I do, and they slept at the...
We did a story. There's an airport outside of Manhattan called the Westchester County Airport, and one of my first stories when I was in New York was investigating this. We had a whistleblower who worked in the tower, in the air control tower at this airport, and he gave us video of the workers, the employees that are supposed to be trafficking, monitoring all the planes coming in and out. And by the way, that was when President Obama was in office, and he used this was his airport. The control tower people were sleeping, dead asleep, heads down, planes coming in, going out. The ones who are awake were playing video games on their computers. So these are the guys in the control tower. And one of the guys in there, an old timer who didn't want to be identified, I think eventually he revealed his identity. He came forward, and it's all run by the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. And what did they do? They tried to defame and put the whistleblower's reputation into disrepair. That's what they tried to do. They go after the whistleblower. They don't fix the problem. So even if your plane is safe, you got guys at control towers sleeping and playing video games.
Same dog, same tricks, And I think even with the Boeing situation, they were referred to as, dogs watching TV. When it came to the certification process of this 737 MAX. And, I'm glad that the administrator, Steve Dixon, has now stepped down. He did said that they'd make a difference, they would do something. But Ed is definitely an unsung hero. But also it should highlight that the FAA's old habits don't seem to be dying. Only people seem to be dying as a result of the lack of change in approach and diligence. And it's a scary thing,
Zipporah is so sweet. You can tell she inherited her dad's sweetness. If this happened to me and my pit bull mother over here died in a plane crash, I'd be sleeping outside this guy's office in Boeing. I would.
No, but I think
I'd be his worst nightmare. This guy.
I was just thinking of something similar, but I was thinking how much it must take out of you emotionally to lobby for justice. To sort of be there as a representative of the people who seek justice. You go to the United States Congress. You go in and talk to people on podcasts. I'm sure you talk to the press, and you are.
She's doing yeoman's work, stuff that has to get done.
There is a word we were all morning. We were running today. You have to apologize me. I can't even think straight. But
Carm, don't bring your baggage into the podcast.
Okay, but I think it's that she's an activist.
She's an activist.
That's
correct.
the word I was looking for. Activist.
So Zipporah, tomorrow is the 3-year mark. I don't want to get personal, and obviously you said you go to church. How do you plan to spend the day? Are you able to share that with us?
Yeah, very simple. Actually, I think this is the first time that I'm trying to pare it back a bit. I'll probably make a cup of tea, light a candle, say a prayer. I think the families are having like a Zoom memorial service, so I'll join in with that. I was hoping to travel up north, which is about 4 hours from where I live in London, to be with my family, but it won't be possible. Maybe shed a few tears, look at some old photos, laugh, and remember the man that raised me, and think forward onto how I can secure a great legacy for him now that he's not here, and start living life somewhat. I think that's something that my brothers and I spoke. We said by the 4th anniversary, we want to look back and see some growth in our own personal lives and in our own personal journeys, because our whole lives has just been thrown at this work, and
it almost came to a grinding halt.
I think that you have
a grinding halt. It came to.
I think Zipporah has secured the legacy by you being born, and I can tell you have a lot of your dad's traits from the way you describe them. So you just being you, I think, is definitely enough for your dad. Harm, you look like you're about to break down.
No. I'm thinking how you always joke about that. I tell you to ask people what you can do for them.
Yes. So this is an ongoing theme in our podcast. I used to ask people, hey, can you help me out? Can you plug this? And then one day Karmela said to me, you got to ask the guests how we can help you. And the first time I did that was with an astrophysicist from Harvard who said he needed $100 million for a telescope. This guy saw what he says. He claims he saw, this guy is a legit astrophysicist at Harvard. Somewhere out by the sun, he saw what he believes is an extraterrestrial vehicle. So he believes in aliens, this guy, and he's at Harvard. But anyway, he asked for $100 million. But for you, honestly, anything we can do, and I know a lot of people obviously in media here in the States. So if there's any way we can help, please stay in touch and please let us know.
Think of it now too. Maybe we can do something.
Yeah, I'll think of it. I'm trying to think. If you're an acting agent, you could represent me. You could be my acting agent. Acting?
Did you say acting?
If you're an acting agent, you can be my agent.
Well, I can definitely introduce. I can. Is that what you? Are you an actress?
That's what I'm trying my best to wield my hand at. Like your mom was saying, this has taken so much. I think I was thinking about it. I went to bed and I was 23 and I've woken up and I'm 26. So I was like, you know what? I want to chase my dreams in this life and I want to figure it out. I think that's one of the last conversations I had with my dad. It was like, go for it. If you want to be a speaker, do it. You know, if you want to, whatever it is you want to do, you know.
So this has nothing to do with anything we just talked about, but here's my 2 cents on that. First of all, listen to your dad. Second of all, listen to, even though he is my direct competition, Joe Rogan, I say it every podcast and I'm going to overtake him. Listen to the podcast about MrBeast, which was just on, and I'll tell you why. His mother wanted him to go to college. His mother wanted him to do this. He was obsessed with YouTube. He started working on YouTube at 11, and it was his whole life. And I'm not saying that you have to be that obsessive, but this is the advice I give. Do what you want to do and do it with passion and go for it. You're very pretty. You're young, very articulate. You're in the acting capital of the world next to New York. You're in London.
No, maybe you can think of, people.
I'll put you in touch with some people. So let's definitely stay connected, but don't think about it. Do it.
Just do it.
My dad is a retired psychiatrist, and I used to say to my dad, and my dad's still with us, I'd say, I feel this way or I feel this way. And my dad said, you ever see that Nike ad? And I was like, what? And he goes, where they say, just do it. And that's the key. So screw everyone, screw the fear. There's a good book, by the way. It's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And I read that book before my first reporting job on TV. I read that book. I was terrified to go on TV. Now I go on TV every night, and I'm terrified that I'm on TV. but that's a whole different story. But Zipporah, let's stay in touch, and I will, if I can mentor you, I will, because I've learned a lot. I didn't start reporting till I was 35 years old. I know I look 36, but I'm actually not. But don't do what I did. Go for it. Go for it.
I'm going.
And
Karmela's falling asleep today.
No, I am not.
Bring the energy, Karmela.
No, but this is I just wanted to tell you, God bless you. That's all I wanted to tell you.
And let me ask you something. What about her dreams of becoming an actress? You want her to become an accountant? Well, these Jewish parents here, they want you to become an accountant, a lawyer, a doctor. Screw that.
The Africans are the same. I'll promise you that.
Yeah. Don't do that.
No.
Don't do that.
I think you are very beautiful. You are very bright, and you are strong. And just don't give up. The secret is not to give up, because there will be, rejections galore. And I know your father was there to balance the rejection. You know, when they said something, we don't want you, we want somebody 2 inches taller or 2 pounds fatter or whatever, your father was, don't give up now. Go for it. If you want it, do it. And you lost that now. You lost that. But you have to do it now for yourself.
And for your father. You know what you should do? We get off the phone or off the Zoom call. This is my mom, how she would pressure me, so I'll pressure you. Find an audition. Find something that scares you and do it. And you'll feel so much better afterwards.
Yeah, we'll do that. Definitely.
Okay. Stay in touch with me, okay?
And when you are famous, say hello.
I will definitely say hello. I love that how you guys work and how you vibe. You are amazing. And Surviving the Survivor, you've got a new subscriber. So
please subscribe and please spread the word among the youngsters on social media, okay?
No, all the British.
All the Brits. We'll be right back with the new schmooze.
Welcome back. It's time for the news schmooze.
Well, that was heavy.
I needed it. But looking at you, Lou, you don't look like yourself.
Look at my glasses. You're still harping on that?
Because this makes it like...
Look at the logo. They're the same glasses.
I know, but on the logo, that's perfect. But on you...
Carm, I can't imagine you crashing to the ground and disappearing. It's a weird thought. Because you're such a pain in my ass. Like, it'd be weird.
I can understand that. But
one day for you to just disappear. I can't imagine what Zipporah goes through. I really liked her a lot. She was, watch out, Ilya.
Is she
That's
smart?
my wife. Very smart. What do you mean that she's smart?
Very smart.
Why'd you just ask if she's smart?
No. I said, isn't she smart?
Oh, isn't she smart? Yeah, she's very smart. And she's fighting for justice. And I hope she pursues her acting career. She's got what it takes. She's got a very gentle, sweet, very sweet persona.
She says she's taking acting class.
Yeah, 2 years. And in London, that's no joke.
You could do Shakespeare after 2 years.
On to the news schmooze, and this is one of the scarier ones. Do you know who Maria, not Bartiromo, but Baranova is?
No.
Not the money honey, but Maria Baranova. So she is the editor-in-chief of Russia Today. She's basically the, I was going to say Christian Amanpour of Moscow, but you texted me this week saying that...
No, I don't go there.
That you're not a fan of Christian Amanpour. I won't say exactly what you said. And how you hope a disease ravages her entire being.
I never said that. You say that about this.
So, anyway, Maria Baranova, the editor-in-chief of Russia Today, which is the state-run media operation known as RT, she did something that no one in Moscow would do. She condemned Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And she said she realizes she could be in danger.
Dead woman walking, like
said.
dead man walking, dead woman walking.
The problem is, I know these people very well. They never send threats. They just kill. So there's kind of a weird silence around me. But I really think, this is a direct quote, but I really think we're on the brink of a nuclear war right now. I am not exaggerating. I have a son. I can't leave because his father won't allow me to leave with him. And so I just prefer to stay in Moscow. It seems like we're either in North Korea or we're going to be killed by a thermonuclear mushroom, she said. I wouldn't quit and I wouldn't lose my salary and job if I was sure that we are going to be alive for many years, but I really don't know what is going to happen to all of us next. Does this concern you, coming from the Tom Brokaw of Russia, Moscow?
You should have told me this before I was looking for a car.
That car's not going to mean a lot when the mushroom cracks.
Exactly.
Do you think, honestly,
No, it's not a joke again. Let's get serious about serious things. This is the scariest thing I heard because she was in a very high position.
She's tapped in. She's the Tom Brokaw of Moscow. But here's the deal. When I was a kid in the 80s, there was the movie The Day After, which was about a nuclear holocaust. And we were terrified in the 80s that there, still the remnants of the Cold War.
Well, there were a few years now of less madness.
But now
it's very bad.
But now it feels, they just shut down Chernobyl today. There was a fire at the other nuclear. Do you think, Karmela, that nuclear war is out of the question or it could happen? Having survived the Holocaust, do you think that something as crazy as this could happen?
Yes.
On to the next story. The juror in the Ghislaine Maxwell case, and out this week, just by coincidence, on Surviving the Survivor, is William Steele, who had a relationship, let's put it that way, with Ghislaine Maxwell.
A carnal relationship.
He reveals exclusive details only on Surviving the Survivor. Carm, you made a great point. I built a great podcast. I produced it. I got great media people, great branding people. Everything is right. We're missing one thing.
I said it. I regretted it because he has very thin skin, and I thought it was funny, but
we're missing the audience. If you ever say I have thin skin again, I will skin you.
Okay.
Back to the story. So the juror in the Ghislaine Maxwell case who failed to disclose that he was sexually abused as a child during jury selection had a strange explanation. He said he was distracted by a breakup and he didn't remember. Quote unquote said, "We just sat there for 3 hours. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have a book. I was sitting, twiddling my thumbs, thinking about the breakup that happened to me a few weeks prior," said Scotty David, who testified in the Manhattan federal court. Now, the problem is, Ghislaine Maxwell, the British socialite, for those of you who have been living under a rock, she's the one who was helping Jeffrey Epstein, who was, we believe, murdered in prison, in jail, awaiting trial. the Ghislaine Maxwell woman now says she deserves a new trial because this juror, Scotty David, gave interviews to media outlets after the verdict, revealing that he had shared his sexual assault experience with fellow jurors during deliberations and it was not truthful on the questionnaire. And honestly, on a legal technicality, he'll probably get a new trial, which is great for us because we did the podcast and she'll be in the news again. I was rushing to get it on air for her sentencing, but maybe we'll have a whole new trial now. We'll get William Steele back on. William Steele knew Ghislaine Maxwell intimately and shared some crazy details about people who were
carnal knowledge. Listen, can you go to the next one?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Although I kind of
like to talk about this.
Now, keep in mind, this is during a war with primetime viewership up a lot, significantly, because we're in the middle of this war. How many viewers do you think Rachel Maddow got last night?
I didn't think she works there.
She doesn't. There's someone filling in. In a country of 390 million people.
Less than 1 million.
1.7 million. Jake Tapper.
Less than Meadow.
1.4 million. Anderson, the stutterer Cooper.
Who is in
Ukraine.
I have to say this.
Lviv, Ukraine, yes.
But may I say something? He is in Ukraine and he looks like this.
You're squinting your eyes. He's so worried.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
He's in Lvov.
Yeah.
Lvov is right
Lviv,
on the...
I believe.
Okay.
It's on the Polish border.
It's on the Polish border where nothing ever happens.
Yeah.
And he stands there in his scarf. And
the Four Seasons constructed a hotel for him for his arrival.
Anyway, no. I cannot stand phoniness. If you want to be in the Ukraine, you should go to Kyiv.
Go to Kyiv and report.
Or don't pretend that you are in this completely quiet.
You don't have a helmet on your head. I don't want to hear from you. Even the big guys at Fox News.
How much? What
do you think Sean Hannity had?
No. I want to know how much did
Anderson Cooper?
Yeah.
He had 1.4 million.
Okay.
And that's in
not
prime
a
time.
lot. Not a lot.
Out of 390 million Americans. The reason I bring that
330 million, unless we multiply during the COVID.
The reason I bring it up, MrBeast, YouTube, 98 million subscribers, many videos, 100 million views. He's branched out, started a hamburger, made $100 million in his first 15 months. What's the point of this, Carm? This podcast is where it's at, right here, branding ourselves. Old media is dead. This is new media. We got to figure out how to get an audience. We're going to have a brainstorming session. We got to pivot a little bit. I don't know.
I have an idea how
start
to get
interviewing
an audience.
dwarfs. I don't know what it takes.
You know how will dwarf is also politically correct.
Little people.
It's height challenged.
I got news for you, Carm. It's going to be more work for you. You're going to have to start
height challenged people.
Vertically challenged.
But let me tell you, you know how we can have a more audience?
Mm-hmm.
Just two little tiny details.
Yeah.
Replacing me and replacing you with somebody talented.
We'll be right back with 3 questions for Grandma.
It's time now for 3 questions for Grandma.
Carm, we are going to have a brainstorming session.
You know what I noticed?
Yeah.
I noticed if I don't eat lunch, which happened today.
Yeah. You're kind of. Are you more clear-headed, do you think?
Just the opposite.
Oh.
I cannot find words. I need that
They say
engine.
that fasting gives you clarity.
Absolutely gives me total opposite of clarity.
We're going to have to rely on our cult-like audience for advice, but we're going to have to pivot.
Okay, let's do the 3 questions.
Okay.
Sorry, I interrupted.
So I got home from work after covering a rape, an alleged rape at the Eden Rock Hotel, the second one by a Lyft driver in as many weeks in Miami Beach.
And I said, then take an Uber.
That
take
was
an
after
Uber,
I went,
not a Lyft at night.
That was after I went to a conference all day for my third job.
All right.
And so I went to bed at 1 in the morning.
No
there's a end to the story. So I go home at 2:30 in the morning. I'm like, whoa, I don't feel like I slept at all. Zizi marches in, my child, says good morning. Following her about 30 seconds later, Vita Aaliyah. Following her 30 seconds after that, Judah Mack, J-Mac, the champ. In my bed, Judah says, can I watch Blippi on your tone? By the way, next to MrBeast, Blippi was top 3 in earners on YouTube. On my tone instead of phone. He calls it a tone. He wants to watch. So I thought it was time to get up and take you to the Volvo dealer. I look at my clock. It's 2:40 in the morning. So what better time to ask for 3 questions for Grandma? Zizi had already fallen asleep in the 30 seconds she was in my room. Judah would only obsess over Blippi on his tone. So all 3 questions come from Vita today.
Okay.
Number 1, why did children have school and grown-ups have work? It's not fair.
Allegedly, the official reason for school is to learn more about things before you grow up.
Yeah, Mr.
But
Beast
unofficial is to get you out of the hair of your mommy until you grow up.
Mr. Beast didn't go to school, making hundreds of millions. Question number 2. I don't know the answer to this, actually. Why do we need trees to breathe?
Oh, I know exactly.
Do you? I have no idea.
And everybody above the age of 10 should know
something
this.
to do with carbon monoxide.
Exactly.
What is the answer?
They breathe out what we breathe in, the trees breathe out. And what we breathe out, the trees breathe in. So they have the opposite function of us, and we breathe in oxygen, they breathe out oxygen, and so forth. No, I knew this.
Last question. Why do some people name their children after people?
Well, it's a Jewish tradition.
Well, I told Vita I named her after my first dog. She didn't like that.
No. In the Jewish religion, you name kids for their deceased grandparents, and no, it's not over the board that everybody does it, but you can. You cannot name people for live people. In the Jewish Sephardi community, you can name people for life.
I today survived buying a Volvo with a survivor. It was the closest I've come to death.
It was really not bad.
We bought that car in like
it's nice time. To know. It's nice to know that your other car is melting down, and you're gonna stick to it, and you will never be able to leave. It's not. I'm not exaggerating.
It's funny. Our salesman, shout out to him. His name is Alex Reynolds at the end, and he's got like a Spanish accent. We're in Miami, so I say, "I thought you were a Cuban." He goes, "Oh, my real name is Alejandro Ronaldo."
He's cute.
Alex Reynolds. Good deal, man. Volvo, by the way, I Instagrammed that out live. Karmela buying a vehicle. If you were smart, you'd sponsor this podcast. If you were smarter, you'd
buy her the Volvo.
And if you're even smarter,
it's a second-hand Volvo, and poor little Karmela couldn't afford the new one.
You'd have Karm advertising. What do you guys think of the glasses?
Nobody gives a damn. Nobody even watches
you care.
It. Well, I care. I'm your mother.
Time to get an audience. We'll be back next week once we find one. Love you guys.
Next week we'll be back to normal, abnormal.
Love you. Bye. Love you.
Bye.